Hello, everyone. Welcome to Consciously Unbiased LinkedIn Live. I'm very excited for our session today. We're going to be talking about putting people first through fair chance hiring. Today's conversation will focus on how workplaces can create support structures for underserved people, including people who are formerly incarcerated or who are veterans or those struggling with homelessness or addiction, to provide pathways to employment. It was inspired by the concept of fair chance hiring, which focuses on giving formerly incarcerated people a better chance at getting jobs. It will also cover social impact metrics to illustrate how doing so can not only benefit people and communities, but also the workplace. We have some amazing guests today, so let's introduce them. We have Golie-Lorenzo Green, Senior Manager at Talent Programs for Waste Management. Kirsten Ham, VP of Workforce and Career Development at Upspire. Dr. Richard Younkins, Senior Manager, Total Talent Management at Waste Management. Gamal Willis, Director of Court Advocacy and Outreach, Avenues of Justice. Shay Harris, Mid-Atlantic Region Director, Corporate Social Responsibility for JP Morgan Chase. And Nicole Ballin, Principal at REDF. Welcome, everybody.
Thank you.
So I'd like to start off with, beyond the titles, if you guys can each talk about why you're so passionate about this work and how did you get started? Golie, can we start with you? So we're just going to go clockwise.
Sure. So I think I've always been exposed to helping others. I watched my grandmother and my mother do it growing up, both as educators. And so, once I was with WM, and even prior to WM, I was always interested in getting involved in the community. I was on two local boards here in Houston. One is Suits for Sons, which was a 9-month program focused on improving individuals' ability to get prepared for the workforce in corporate America. So we focused on African-American males in college, went through a 9-month program and got them prepared. And then I also do advocacy work for the Sickle Cell Association of Houston. So these are all things that were components of me already. And when WM opened up the opportunity that they had for IEP and talent programs, it just was a perfect fit for me to take my personal interest and pair it with what I've done in business, which is talent acquisition and recruitment.
Love it.
Hi, I'm Gamal Willis. I was able to see the impact that is happening as far as schools to prison pipeline. I saw what lack of resources can do to various communities, lack of employment prospects, what that can do to communities as well. And so for the past 25 years, I've been working with different populations in regards to that with various community-based organizations. Avenues for Justice provided me an opportunity to be even more hands-on, working with young people between the ages of 13 to 24. And so that way, as they get older, hopefully these various problems won't affect them. And so that's what has prompted me as a young person. I was always told that the most valuable thing that you can give is your time and energy. And that's what I try to do. So that's why I'm here at Avenues for Justice.
Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. Shay?
Good afternoon, everyone. Again, my name is Shay Harris, and really looking forward to today's conversation. I know I'm passionate about this work, one, because it's very personal for me. There are my loved ones, that have been impacted by the penal system. And so from a very early age, I quickly realized I was fortunate enough to go to a private school, but still lived in the inner city with my mother, who was an educator. And from a very early age, realized distinct differences in how my private school friends were treated versus the friends I had in my neighborhood when the same activities were happening. And so with privilege comes a level of responsibility. And so throughout really my career, striving for a just society has been my North Star. I started in the nonprofit sector doing direct service work and working with formerly incarcerated people, and transitioned to local government here in Washington, D.C., where I live, and currently now work at JP Morgan Chase. And I have to say, a year into my role, one of the reasons I came to work at JP Morgan Chase was their very vocal and intentional work around a clean slate, second chance, and reentry. And so, yeah, I definitely have seen this theme throughout my life, and am very passionate about ensuring that we center our most marginalized population. So again, looking forward to the conversation.
Welcome. Yeah, I think JP Morgan's done some amazing stuff, and their CEO is very passionate about this topic. So I'd love to see that. Richard?
Hey, good morning, everyone. I think it's still morning, or maybe it's afternoon on the East Coast. I'm super passionate about the veteran and military spouse space in creating a spot in corporate America where we can address some of the consistent themes that happen to a veteran or a military spouse, and that is either underemployment or retention once they get into an organization. And so I will very candidly come clean that I think I was part of the problem before I became part of the solution. As a veteran myself, 25 years ago, I transitioned out before the internet. So I would write a resume, mail it, follow up with a phone call, hope to get a job interview, right? That's not what veterans are facing today. But as I was elevated in director level roles and I had the power to hire people, I found myself saying, wow, if the veterans need some help, like you shouldn't be the first employer to hire them out of the military, because you have to kind of take all of the baggage that comes along. And then during the pandemic, when I had a lot of free time in my hands, I was looking for a postdoctorate study to work on. And I said, instead of me sitting around here complaining about, the readiness or some of the quirks that come with hiring a veteran, let me go out and create a solution. So I created Becoming an Elite Employer for Veterans and Military Spouses. I was obnoxious with WM and said, we got to buy into this. I believe in this. And one day they tapped me on the shoulder in May and said, we want you. So I am happy to be a part of this conversation. You guys will probably be able to have to dial me down a little bit. One of my main missions that I'm trying to help with is military spouses, and address the 90% of them are female, and they suffer the highest unemployment rate, 24%. And the only people who can solve that is corporate America, the only ones.
I agree, definitely. Well, welcome. We're excited to have you, and I love the passion. Kirsten.
Hey, y'all. I'm Kirsten. Yeah, no worries. So I was fortunate enough to have the opportunity to start a social enterprise out of college. I like to joke that my employer didn't have money to hire anyone with actual experience. But my senior year of college, I was consulting with a social enterprise based out of Africa. And it just clicked with me, the model, the fact that businesses could have such greater impact directly by employing individuals with barriers to employment. And so my parent organization, Presbyterian Night Shelter, is the largest homeless service provider in North Texas. They serve 1,000 individuals a day. About 700 stay every single night at the shelter. And Upspire is the employment program. And so I started 6 years ago, and 6 years later, we have 4 different business lines. In Q1 of next year, we'll have 175 full-time jobs available, and all of our employees get the same benefits that our CEO does. So subsidized healthcare, generous paid time off, life insurance, 401k match. And then we also provide perks that remove or reduce barriers to employment for individuals, such as free food each day, free transportation to and from the job site, and we're profitable. And so I'm super passionate about working with large employers like Golie at WM, but also just getting the word out there that you can be an employer that supports and removes barriers for your employees, and you can still be profitable. It is possible to do both. So yeah, I'm excited about the conversation and to see where it goes.
I love it. I love what you just said at the end. I always say doing good is profitable. It's not mutually exclusive. And so I think it's important to highlight that. Nicole? Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks so much, everybody. Appreciate this opportunity to discuss this important issue. So I belong to an organization called Red F, and we're an intermediary funder of employment social enterprises like Upspire. And similar to Kirsten, I was drawn to this work from the private sector and really intrigued by the market-based principle of solving some of these really important social issues. So what we do is we fund employment social enterprises. Their express purpose is to employ barrier target populations. And we support that work, including trying to create more employment pipelines out of those employment social enterprises into corporations. Excited to engage in the conversation today.
Welcome. So we'll start off with why do you think it's important for companies to focus on how to create pathways to employment for people who have been underserved, such as those who are formerly incarcerated or struggling with homelessness? Who would like to start?
I'll start off by saying that's a pool of talent that unfortunately doesn't go looked at sometimes. There's over 19 million who have had a touch with the criminal justice system. That's a large pool that are dedicated, that are willing, loyal, but just haven't had that opportunity. And so I think companies need to think about that. These are aspects, or these are talents that can help them and help their company grow. And so that's a large group and needs to be examined.
I think there's I'm sorry, Golie.
No, go ahead.
I think there's a piece that, you take an opportunity to reflect of your personal journey and decisions that come in life and where they take you to, right? To take you to either a positive journey, or sometimes it just doesn't work out the way either you thought of, or maybe your thought and maturity. And so have we become such an unempathetic society that we look at somebody and we shun them, right? Because today we're shunning this group, tomorrow it's my group. I just don't fit into the narrative. And so when you think about folks that have come out of incarceration, which is not my area of expertise, other than I'm a human being and I want to see people be successful. And if I have an opportunity to clear a path, right, and they have the desire to get on the path that's going to help them be successful, I have an obligation to do that. I can give you all the stats about, we don't have enough employees in America. We're struggling. There's the quote unquote war for talent and all of those things. How about just taking the human side of it and saying, I would like to drive to my office in Houston and see less homeless people. How can I do that besides give money? Because not that money's not a good thing, but how about you create an environment where it could be self-sustaining, and then they pay it forward, right? And so for me, it goes to just general decency that I was taught when I was 5 years old. And I just have to sometimes remember that, being in corporate America, where sometimes it doesn't feel like general decency reigns. So that's my 2 cents.
Love that.
Rich, man, that's phenomenal. It's a perfect example of what I think the importance of this particular question is. It's, we look at a high unemployment rate as like 8%, 10%. That would be something that we probably haven't seen in who knows how long. But I was looking at a study before we got on this call that the White House had put out in May, and it's got some old data from like 2008 and whatnot, but I'm sure it hasn't changed much. And at that point in time, when they did the research, the unemployment rate for individuals who were previously incarcerated was 27%, compared to 5% of the general population. And then when you start to scale back on those numbers and look at the demographics, so white men versus white women, black men versus black women, the numbers are alarming, like alarming. 50+% of black men who were previously incarcerated are unemployed. that's a number that just doesn't make sense. And to your point, Rich, when you say things like, well, we're talking about how it's a war for talent and we can't find people for, hourly roles and not even for salary roles, and there's nowhere to go and look and turn. But there's programs out there that develop people to have skills to be able to go to work and actually offer something to the company, something beneficial to the company. The company gains a great amount of benefit from it because they're able to get someone who's engaged, who's actually looking at trying to, reshape their life. You're going to have challenges with hiring regardless. It doesn't matter if you hire somebody who never was incarcerated or homeless, or if you hire someone who's had a great life their entire life. You're going to have challenges with hiring because everybody's not a fit. So I think if we just look at the natural way of doing recruitment and say, look, there's opportunities to engage a new workforce out there. Let's engage them and see how we can bring them into our organization and our culture. It's the right thing to do.
Golie, you actually making me think of two things here. One is, how many of you guys have made a mistake in your life? Right? So smart people make mistakes, and then sometimes you get caught and you get punished for it, right? But doesn't mean that there's a monopoly. Like, doesn't mean that everyone who's gone to jail is not smart, right? And so there's this untapped talent pool. And number two is, if you think about incarceration and society and socialisms, the social norms that were criminal like 20 years ago are no longer criminal, but they're still on your record, right? And so you look at prohibition in the 20s, and alcohol was illegal, and there's a ton of people got arrested for that, and they probably couldn't get jobs after that for like 20 years. And we're doing the same thing with marijuana now. And so I think we have to sort of frame what we think is acceptable policy in terms of background checks and who we allow into the door, right? Because I think those things constantly change. Shay, what are your thoughts?
Love getting put on the spot. No, but I would echo everything that the panels already shared, and would just also offer, like, aside from the moral imperative and like literally as Richard said, it's the right thing to do. And the other panelists I think just shared the numbers in terms of it's an untapped pool that really deserves an opportunity. And to the point I think you were making, none of us are our worst mistake. And so for a country that actually truly believes in opportunity, that truly believes in rehabilitation, then really what we're talking about is a no-brainer. And if none of that, right, is a convincing argument, I think just the sheer numbers, again, 1 in 3 Americans have an arrest and or criminal record. And 90, I think it's roughly like 97%, and I might be off by a few percentages, but at least 90% of people that are currently incarcerated will come home at some point. And so when we talk about, again, like literally just the math, that barring this demographic from meaningful employment or economic opportunity, really puts us all at risk when we look at our major cities and some of the violence that is plaguing a lot of inner cities. It again, at minimum, people have to be able to take care of themselves. And so either we invest on the front end, which is hopefully in preventative measures that stop the pipeline to prison and prevent people from ever entering and having adverse impact with the systems, carceral systems, or we pay for it on the back end. And so the investment is I think one, a lot less on the front end, and certainly has better outcomes, but we know how to do this. If we look at any suburban neighborhood, we know what it takes in order for people to succeed. It's clean air, it's a green environment, it's healthy foods options, it's safe communities. And so everyone is deserving of that. And I think when we really peel back the layers and have that frank conversation about who in this country we feel is deserving of opportunity, of safety, then we'll solve a lot of the issues that we have ahead.
Absolutely. Nicole, what are some of the benefits to companies and workplace culture when it comes to hiring people from underserved groups? Any specific stories that you have to share?
We approach this work a little bit from arm's length. So we're an intermediary funder, and as I said, we've engaged in conversations with corporations around employer pipelines. And I think diversity of workforce is proven to be beneficial across the board. And I think this is a different element of diversity that brings really important assets to an organization. And I think just also reminding corporations to connect with that humanity, right? To Richard's point, is just so vital to some of the longer term goals that our organizations should have, but are unfortunately mostly driven by short term profits. So I think it's engaging in a diverse workforce and really stretching an employer to be flexible to the needs of the employee. And I don't think that necessarily matters what those needs are, but it's just a really important exercise.
Absolutely. Anyone else want to add to that?
I think Nicole covered it pretty well, but to add to that, I mean, almost every single one of my employees has a pretty significant barrier to employment. And yet over the last 6 years, we've been able to graduate 350 of our employees out to higher paying jobs back into the general workforce. And my employees are incredibly resilient. They have overcome and lived through a lot. And to have an employee as a part of your team who has life experiences that they've learned from and who is incredibly resilient and can add a different outlook to a team, I think any company would benefit from that.
It's amazing.
Yeah, I think the numbers are pretty profound. We've been measuring the performance of our program since 2019. And I can say that, from a contingent workforce position specifically, not even looking at full-time employees, but just from a contingent workforce position, our average employee in the contingent workforce usually stays on assignment for about 21 days. So that's a very short period of time. That's not that the assignment was supposed to end in 21 days. That's just how long they've lasted. And it's a tough job at WM. We have some tough roles on our front line. But when we look at individuals we've hired through our Innovative Employment Pathways programming, which is where we work with Kirsten with homelessness, individuals impacted by homelessness, and individuals who may have been previously incarcerated and whatnot, that average goes to about 91 days. What's interesting is that the way the program is built, at 90 days, that's when we look to convert the person to a full-time employee. So if you look at just a metric like that, the performance is profoundly different. That's less PPE that we're spending money on. That's less training that we have operations spending time doing. That's a quicker performance and productivity in the facilities that we work within, because you have somebody who's fully trained and aware and knows how to execute their job. So I could go on for days about the reasons that we've seen on that.
I just want to harmonize there with what Golie is saying. It's an investment, but we've been looking at it also as far as what employers are seeing. But just imagine if you are someone who is applying for this job and constantly hearing no and going to various places. That's crushing. And so that breaks their spirit. It breaks the family spirit. And so that goes back to the humanity that we were talking about. It's the right thing. And if we keep them in mind, that's key.
There's also a major ROI on that, right? Because it builds loyalty. You give people chances. They'll never forget that, and they'll work harder for that. What are some of the benefits to the community at large?
I think an obvious benefit is that when you have somebody who finds value, like, hey, I get to get up every day, I get to contribute to something, it's going to help their household. And what do people do inside their household, right? They spend, they go out and they get involved in things that they weren't involved in before, maybe out of financial insecurity or some other reason. They have a sense of pride, right? Somebody didn't look at me for my mistake. They found value in my contribution. And now I'm benefiting from that. And then I'm helping other people benefit from that, right? If we all got $50 or $100 more in our paycheck, society says that we're not going to save 90% of that, right? We're going to go out to one extra dinner. We're going to go out and buy our kids something. We're going to go out and donate. We're going to give to the church. And it helps break the cycle of just kind of bad or negative things, because it's one more thing that is a positive, right? So you take the checks and the minuses, the pluses and the minuses, right? And you're filling the column up with more pluses, and it lifts everybody else up, right? When you think about, I'm going to go out for the night because now I have a job. Well, now I'm going to hire a babysitter. Now that babysitter is going to go out and go do things. And I think the pride goes a long way in that, hey, somebody found value in me, in my contribution. And again, I'm going to spread, quote unquote, the wealth, whether it's through my actions or through my ability to do things that I hadn't been able to do before.
Yeah, absolutely. And so you guys have all worked with different populations. Can you share what are some of the biggest challenges and barriers for companies to create pathways for them to be employed? And what are the things that you've seen companies do to help open those doors?
If I can go back to the previous question real quick, and then I'll jump to that one. I totally agree with what you're saying. Everyone deserves the opportunity to contribute through work or have supportive employment. But to kind of dig into why companies should create these pathways, when you deny someone economic opportunity who's formerly incarcerated and is on the reentry track and is trying to get their first job out of prison and or currently or formerly struggling with homelessness, you're perpetuating the problem. It costs money to successfully complete parole, whether it's buying the bus ticket to go see your parole officer or paying back the court fines, which are ridiculous for those who may not know. You're denying someone the ability to successfully complete their parole despite their best intentions. If someone's currently homeless, they need money, whether it's disability, SSI, or earned income to get out of homelessness. And so the benefits to the community at large are enormous. I mean, we have the ability to solve our societal issues if corporate America would treat the mission equally as important as their return to their shareholders. If you had the Apples and Microsofts of the world holding a mission equally as important as their profits and their return to shareholders, we would look so different as a country. So I really don't think that can be like overstated how important this could be and what the impacts really truly could be on a large scale. For the populations that Upspire works with, those who have been impacted by the justice system currently or formerly struggling with homelessness, I mean, the biggest barrier is just getting the initial chance. When we were first starting, it was really hard, especially being a homeless shelter initially, to have companies look at us and take us seriously. And even now, when we're a successful established company, people have a really hard time understanding that we're a service provider, that I'm a vendor. I can act just as any other staffing company can. I just happen to remove or reduce the barriers to my employees, and I hold my mission equally as important as our profits. But I think it's an education issue. I really do. I think if companies like WM, like JP Morgan can look at social enterprises or look at their employment pathways and put true resources and take the time to learn and understand, then I think the pathways for employment would come easier. Because it's, for me, sitting on the nonprofit side of things, it's still just kind of a gap in understanding. And I think Nicole could speak to that and what they've seen from the Red F side of things.
Thank you for teeing that up for me. So as an intermediary, what we've been trying to do is partner employment social enterprises with corporations. And some of the common sort of challenges creating those pipelines are corporations have large recruitment requirements, and they often have a national footprint. And so trying to partner them with much smaller nonprofit organizations that are offering barrier removal services can be really challenging. And it's a very intensive relationship management piece of like both holding the corporations and understanding their needs and being able to meet to get the demand and the supply side to meet. The other issues that we've seen are that HR departments and corporations are not incentivized really to support some of these initiatives from a risk perspective, because they see this as a high risk endeavor in most organizations. And so I think working with those organizations to be able to figure out how to mitigate some of the perceived risk, much of it is not actually a reality, is really critically important, as well as aligning incentives with frontline managers. So if you have someone who's out in a marketplace recruiting, being able to incentivize them to choose someone maybe from a varied background versus someone that is just more of a known entity is just critically important. So I think that those would be some of the areas that we've seen as being challenges.
I think the complexity of hiring in some aspects has gotten out of hand. And what I mean by that is when I came in, my first job as a director in a different sector, they used to say all the time, hire tough to manage easy, which has now been translated into hire perfect and slow. And when somebody who is homeless, they don't have 6 months to go through a process like you're curing cancer, right? They have an immediate need. And we see that frequently, right? We're going to give up the good who can get managed into a great or developed into a great, right? In search of the perfect purple unicorn. And rarely does that purple unicorn exist. And you compound it in with some of the things that happen, again, with the employee shortage, is that everybody today, for the most part, and I know I'm generalizing, probably shouldn't do that as an academic, but everybody today is looking for the set and forget employee. Because I'm so busy, I don't have 6 months to spend with you. I don't have 6 months to spend with you, the veteran, to transition you from active service where you're not going to have community anymore. You're not going to have shared experiences anymore with your neighbor. I don't have that time. I have to get you in that job because I have 2 other jobs that are open that I have to do it. And if we would just stop and pause and see all of these non-traditional candidates and pathways, we would have a lot less problems if we could just give time. And I think, as somebody had mentioned earlier, time is the biggest commodity, and I get it, but it has made the hiring process so convoluted. I used to say my job at WM as a director of operations of a business unit, hiring people in this company is like turning a battleship around in a bathtub. Good luck. And it's unnecessary. I mean, we're not asking you to figure out how to build a bridge from San Francisco, California to the moon. We're asking you to drive a truck that picks up trash, or to be a bookkeeper, or to answer a phone. And so we've overvalued this part. And then so what happens? All of the underserved communities, they're outliers. And we don't pick them up in this because we can't give them the benefit of the doubt, or we haven't shown that ability or willingness. So I'm a soapbox on this. I think there's a lot of things that you look around and you say, if it smells rotten, it's probably rotten. Why does it take so long to get there's a job open? Why does it take so long?
Wow. I mean, there's so much to unpack there. You gave a lot of good things to think about and examples. And I have to say, I love your sayings too. They were amazing. Anyone else want to add to this?
I work with a hard population, those between the ages of basically 16 to 24 as far as workforce. And so already there's a struggle there. And then compound that with justice impact. We almost have to give incentives for ones to just have the opportunity to even have our young people be interns. Our young people go through a strenuous job readiness program. They're ready, and as I mentioned before, to hear no can be devastating, and that's the start of their work history or their work life. So that has been hard to get other people, other organizations, or other companies on board. and the impact that it might have on our young people.
Yeah. I also think, I took this class in college and I still remember to this day. It was called Inequality in America, and it was migration patterns of homeless people, right? And going into it, I was very ignorant. I thought they just didn't want jobs, right? They didn't want to work. And I didn't realize all the structural things that we put up as organizations to prevent people from even applying. Like if I don't have an address, that's a barrier to entry. If I don't have an email address, that's a barrier to entry. If I don't have a phone number, that's a barrier to entry. And so we really need to start taking, or if I don't pass a background check on something that's a nonviolent criminal, it's a barrier to entry when it really doesn't affect how I deliver on a job, right?
Sheesh. What I would argue is that the average person, if they saw a homeless person with a cell phone, they would be critical of that. Mm-hmm. But how are they supposed to get a job without a cell phone? How are they supposed to get a job? How are they supposed to know stuff? How are they supposed to research? All a cell phone is today is a mini computer. But if you saw, if the average person, not trying to cast aspersions on somebody, sees a homeless person walking down the street with an iPhone, they're going to be like, oh, because they couldn't spend their money. That's the lifeline to information and opportunity, is being able to communicate. Absolutely. And so, I think people need to reflect and say, where are our unconscious biases leading us to say like that, kind of a negative response on people. I get it, right? If you got an Xbox on the corner, I might question that, right? But I'm talking about a cell phone, right? It's vital for somebody to be connected and potentially be successful.
Mm-hmm. I would be remiss if I didn't plug a really great resource that one of our employment social enterprises has just come out with. So the Cara Institute in Chicago has a consulting service that works with employers to help identify what some of these barriers are and how to overcome them. And they've just come out with the Advocate, ADVOKIT. And it's a free resource, and it basically outlines things like the implicit structural elements that are preventing employers from tapping into this talent pool. And it talks about things like pay and benefits, the scheduling and flexibility, and how that is really critical to be matched to the target population. Unnecessary job requirements, 4-year degrees that are listed as required, or driver's licenses that are required that actually aren't necessary to perform the role. The interview process and how that inadvertently filters out individuals from this target population, onboarding practices, career advancement opportunities. So I would really encourage everybody to take a look at that.
Absolutely. That's a great. If we can put that in the link, everyone, that'd be great so everyone can see it.
Sure.
What advice do you have? So there's one part is to break down the barriers to let talent in. The second part is how do we attract that talent? So do you all have any advice on where and how we can attract underserved populations, and how do we go about this intentionally?
Yeah, the talent attraction, I don't think is as difficult as what most people would think. I think the challenge is truly in how you engage the population and what you do to make sure that you're set up appropriately to have the proper support structures in place. It's not an issue of having access to the talent, but to Nicole's point, when she mentioned pairing CBOs or community-based organizations with corporations across the country on a national scale, that is difficult, because community-based organizations who do have connections with the individuals who are in those communities, whether it be homelessness or individuals who were previously incarcerated, they usually work in a very local format. So it creates a situation where you have to be very clear on what it is that you are looking to procure from that population. You need to identify what the roles are that you want to market to them, and you need to be very clear about how you engage them on that so that you can have a direct connection on, hey, here's the opportunity, here's the process, this is what we're going to do, this is about the amount of time it should take. If you do it in a format where you try to approach it without putting any work into it, and you say, I'm going to post Rex and say that I'm a fair chance hiring company, you're not going to get anybody. But I mean, that's because you're not doing anything that's any different than what you normally would have done. Yeah. So I
love that. Yeah, and I think it's important to make sure you go to the right channels to do the outreach, right? So it's the nonprofit organizations in the local community. It's also advertising, right? Because I may think from an underserved place that I don't have the chops to work for a JP Morgan. But if JP Morgan says, I hired 10,000 people from your neighborhood, all of a sudden that changes my mindset and makes me apply, right? And that's a way to sort of build that talent pool. Any other strategies you guys have to do the outreach?
I would echo what was already shared and just add, I think, trusted voices within community. I think the hyper local value add, it cannot be like overstated enough. Like it's really about people are going to apply and be hired, right, by people that they're in community and or relationship with. And so to the extent, to the example used, right, if 5 trusted voices out of that 10,000 go back to their respective communities and say, hey, I know like historically what banks have been in our community, and I am working there and I feel empowered and it's a great opportunity. It's just going to mean way more than whatever we're going to spend in earned media, right, to try to advertise for a position. So again, I think really relationships with critical community voices is imperative.
Definitely.
I think that Shay and Golie really just hit home runs in my opinion. But one of the things that I would say, just as a small add-on, as an organization, your attention has to be authentic relationships. You can't just be a taker. I'm here to get 7 employees to be a job. You have to be a giver. You have to be able to give what your capabilities are, right? Like if we're a trash company, don't ask us to be a tech company. We're not a tech company, we're a trash company, right? But you have to be authentic in your relationship. It has to be genuine. It can't be just when you need to fill in. Like I have 20 job openings, my hair is on fire for the hair that I don't have. Or like, hey, I don't have any job openings, but I need to be a good citizen, authentic. I need to be involved with what's important to them. If what's important to them is a monthly employer meeting through advocacy groups, and guess what? I have to show up there. I have to be a part of that. I'm either going to be embedded in the community or I'm going to be an add-on to the community. And what is going to be a more effective way is embedded. And again, it takes time, but more importantly, it takes an authentic effort. You have to authentically bring yourself and say, I got it. And I'm going to learn more about what you do. And I want you to learn more what we do. And I think we're going to have a good partnership. This is going to be a two-way street. I think we're going to be partners here.
So I think, Richard, you brought up a good point. I think we have to make sure as organizations that we put the right people who have passion for that community in the place of power to do things about it, right? So just take your organization. You and Golie both work for the same company. Your passion is veterans in the workplace, right? And so you built that community outreach and they feel it and it's contagious, right? And Golie's is underserved, formerly incarcerated people, right? And so he's built an outreach and a huge pipeline, and they know that it's a give and take relationship from him. And so that attracts a talent pool, right? And so I think it's making sure not just that you put the effort in, but you put the right people in the right spots to do it, to represent you.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I think the other thing too is, it's not difficult to find those community-based partners. I mean, Upspire, who's on this call, is a perfect example. But if you just type in simple things, like if you go to Google and type in, opportunities to support the homeless, you're going to find it. If you type in reentry, which is basically second chance, opportunities and whatnot, you're going to find things. You're going to find lots of things. There's conferences. There's all types of opportunities to network. Of course, you've got Red F on here too. So, I mean, it's not a difficult thing to find the options to find partners that you can, build an actual process and program around. You can do that. But yeah, to Rich's point, you have to have partnership in it. We meet with our partners on a regular basis. We get reporting from them. We look at ways to improve what we're doing. We look at ways to help them improve what they're doing. And that helps us build the program and expand it further. And I think that's what you have to focus on if you really want to get serious about engaging different populations through fair chance hiring.
Absolutely. And so now you've taken down some of the barriers to entry. You've done the outreach. Now you start bringing the talent in. It's not a one-way street. It's a two-way relationship, right? So now what do we do as companies to prepare our internal population to be inclusive? And what do we do on the onboarding side? And then what do we have to do from a policy standpoint to make sure that that people feel welcome and their voices are heard?
So that's there's a lot there for that one. I'll be honest. I think that there's a lot that needs to be done in preparing operations leaders to receive individuals who are coming through different talent pipelines. And when I say that, I'm talking much bigger than fair chance hiring. Like, I think that what we're experiencing in the talent market today is a big proponent of a change in what employees are looking for within an organization. And so that requires a change in how managers engage employees in order to get the most effective performance out of the workforce, right? And so when you look at individuals who are coming through fair chance hiring, it only makes it that much more serious, because you don't want someone to come into the organization who might have come through a program where they were previously incarcerated. Nobody's going to put that in front of everybody, but you may have somebody who just doesn't know any better than to ask somebody, well, were you previously, were you like, did you come from the prison program or something like that? Nobody calls it that, but you will have people in a large organization that might inadvertently say something like that and offend somebody. So you need to definitely train your personnel. You definitely need to make sure that they're prepared and that they understand like what emotional intelligence is and what emotional intelligence is in regards to how you engage your workforce. And it needs to be made bigger than just the population. Like, you can do it for that population, but I feel like that kind of ostracizes them and it doesn't get to the root cause of everything. You need to focus on the entire aspect of how do you engage the workforce in a way where you're not ostracizing people and you're not putting people on, on television to put all of the things that they may not want to discuss or disclose in front of the world. The purpose is build a community where people are engaged, and then make it a good place to work so that individuals want to come to that environment and perform. If you can do those two things effectively, you're going to win above a lot of other competitors. But I don't think that gets enough conversation. So I'll just touch on that point because I think you had like 3 pieces to that question. So I don't want to go too much further.
I love it, though. It's great. Anyone else want to add to that?
I completely agree with what Golie's saying, and to set up new hires for success, give all the information that you possibly can up front. And if after an individual goes through the screening process, especially for some of companies' entry-level roles, let the individual know everything that they're qualified for, and then let them choose the role that they would like. If they would like to go on tour and see it before they sign up for that role, and you can accommodate that, do that. If you can create ownership and buy-in initially before the individual's even onboarded, and then they get to choose their role. And can I also say, like, please do your screening in advance. So if you're hiring a contingent labor force and the goal is for them to become your employee at 90 days, let your contingent staffer know what the background requirements are up front, and make sure that they screen up front. Because if you are trying to employ individuals with barriers to employment and they buy into the program and they want to become your employee and they get to the 90 days successfully, and then the company runs the background and the company says, oof, sorry, you don't qualify, you've just put another barrier in their life, and it's probably a big disappointment and it's another setback. So do everything that you can up front to make sure that individuals will be successful before they're even onboarded, and then do everything you can to create opportunities for buy-in. And also, if I can go back to what Golie's saying, if you're in a place of leadership or HR, please don't lead. When you try to get buy-in or tell your company about a fair chance hiring program or however you're going to coin it, don't lead with people's barriers. Please don't call them homeless people. Please don't call them justice impacted people. Say their names. they're people. They're not their barriers. And I think if that conversation comes from leadership and that example is set from leadership, then the barrier becomes the byproduct. And then companies really shouldn't use employees' personal stories as marketing gimmicks. And so if the whole reason that you're trying to do a hiring program is to get the feel-good stories, just don't. Your employees' stories are their own. And just setting those tones and having those conversations up front before a company starts a program like this, I think will make it that much more successful.
Those are all great points too. And I actually love what Gabriel said, give the candidate dignity to decide.
Yeah, absolutely. There's some really great training on asset framing, which I think is kind of at the base of what we're saying. Don't speak to their deficits, speak to their strengths. And Trabian Shorters is phenomenal in this space. So I would highly recommend, if employers are interested in how to speak about this issue, to go through some of his programming.
Definitely. Richard, unemployment is low for veterans, but if we dig a little deeper, we look at retention. How are companies better at retaining veterans, and how do you overcome the issue of 25% unemployment for military spouses?
So, I mean, those are definitely dissertation topics, but I'll go one. I think that let me tackle the retention spot first. Like all employees, right? Veterans don't want to be treated different. They just have different experiences. And what I would say is, somebody, well, what do you mean by that? Well, up until last year, for the last 20 years, a transitioning veteran has either directly or been indirectly involved in a war. That's a little bit different than when somebody jumps from, our competitor to WM, who doesn't have that background. So there's a couple of things. Number one is having a mentor. There's a lot of veterans inside your organization. If you have a big organization, they can have you can set up a mentor program to make that a soft landing for transitioning veterans. The other piece is like just understanding, educating the differences on what it's like to be in the civilian world and what it's like to be in the military world, because those significant life events start to impact your decision on, did I get out of the Army too soon, or if I wasn't a retiree. And what I mean by that, something very, very basic that a transitioning service member has. They get paid on the 1st and the 15th. What if the cable bill comes on the 8th? What do? Do I pay it early or do I pay it late? Like for us, we take that for granted. We get paid every other week. We get paid every week, whatever that is, right? We just take it for granted, but it's a way of life. They never paid a veteran while they were on active duty, never paid a health premium. It was free. So the first time they get their paycheck and they see whatever that contribution is out of their check, they're like, whoa, Nelly, what's this? Like, I didn't know I had a partner. No, that's called your health care. And they never had a copay. So those are significant events, right? If everything lines up perfectly in your life and your pathway is clear, you're not sick, you get into a good community, you're employed, then you don't have those deteriorating factors. And I think when an organization can help with that community setup, it gives you a better opportunity to get past that 2-year mark, and the 2-year mark is the magic mark. If you can, 80% of transitioning veterans don't make it beyond the first 2 years. They go and find another employer, right? So when it comes to the military spouses, I'm just going to be I plan on being the noisy guy in the room on this subject, because some of the barriers that are in the way of military spouses are archaic hiring or transitioning practices. And what I mean by that, if you work for a medium-sized company that's throughout the country, I'm an accountant, I live in Cleveland, and I say, oh, I want to move to Florida, I want to transfer. There is no company in America that doesn't make you jump through at least some hoops. Well, you have to apply for that position. Well, that person has to interview you. How do you know you're the right fit? They may already had something. That barrier alone is detrimental to military spouses. Today, I'm in Fort Lewis, Washington with my spouse in the Army. Tomorrow, they're going to be in Fort Monmouth, New Jersey. The company is in both spots. I've been with the company for 8 years. Why do I have to do cartwheels to keep my job?
Absolutely.
And so that's a huge factor, because the average tenure in America today is about 4.3 years at a company. And the average military person may move around every 3 to 4 years. So you have like this perfect storm of people are leaving an organization, people are moving around. Corporate America has to be smarter than that. They have to be able to figure that piece out. And it's uncomfortable, because if I'm the hiring manager in Florida, like, why am I getting stuck with this employee that's coming from Washington? Like, how come I don't get to pick my own? So you have to have honest discussions inside the organization of what a policy is going to be. And if they don't, it's not going to help the spouses in that spot. It's not.
Absolutely. So I think before we end, we have 2 more questions. One is, and I know JP Morgan's really led the effort in this for the industry, is what can we do to modify our current screening process for background checks so that we're not further discriminating against people who are disadvantaged because of our justice system?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, clean slate and ban the box legislation certainly varies across the country depending on where you are. And so I think it's a great starting point. Often it's not enough, because as a lot of this conversation has talked about, there's still an immense amount of collateral consequences that come with having a record. But certainly as a starting point, I think banning the box is something that, is really low hanging fruit at this point. And not just on employment opportunities, but also for housing, which I know is not the focus of today's conversation, but I really think it goes hand in hand in terms of, if people don't have a safe space to live and lay their head, then how successful can we anticipate them being on a job? And so I think that again is low hanging fruit. JP Morgan has done that, and so we also are a part of a cohort that of companies rather, which is called the Second Chance Business Coalition, that is sharing best practices and lessons learned. And that cohort is being stood up in Wilmington, Delaware, and is really working with other private sector entities to push clean slate legislation, and having very candid conversations about how we as private companies can do a better job of engaging this particular demographic. And so in addition to that, again, I think a lot of it has to unfortunately happen, fortunately or unfortunately happen at the state legislature. But in addition to that, there's also, I think, some federal legislation that also could be really helpful in helping to clear. So when we talk about expungement, when we talk about record sealing, which would allow, again, people to not be caught through this carceral system, would be imperative as well.
Great points. And I think everyone has to make sure they start talking to their local legislation around this, as well as the national representatives. Thank you, everybody. This is an amazing discussion. I think I'd love to do this again, because I think there's a lot more that we need to dig into. If there's anything I have left out or do you want to add, please take the time now to share that. But I definitely think this is helpful for everyone watching, and I'm excited about the future, because I think this is being highlighted front and center, and I think it's going to make a big difference.
I just have one more resource that I'd like to share. So Talent Rewire is an organization that is focused on building a network of employers that are dedicated to fair chance hiring. So if there are any folks on the line that need some more support, that's also another great resource, and I'll drop a link in the chat.
Okay, thank you so much. All right, well, have a wonderful day.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Bye.